Welcome to my channel. In this video, we will be discussing why religious practice does not always lead to personal transformation. Religion occupies an important place in the lives of millions of people. Across societies, many individuals regularly visit temples, mosques, churches, gurudwaras, and other places of worship, while also observing rituals, prayers, and customs as part of daily life. Because religion is often associated with morality, discipline, compassion, and self-restraint, it is natural to expect that people who are actively religious will also display better conduct, greater empathy, and stronger ethical character in everyday life. Yet this expectation does not always seem to match reality. It is a common observation that outwardly religious people are not necessarily kinder, more honest, or more humane than those who do not identify as religious. This raises an important and uncomfortable question. If religion is meant to elevate human character, why is such transformation not more visible in ordinary life? The answer is not simple, but it becomes clearer when we distinguish between religious activity and inner moral change. One of the main reasons for this gap is that being religious and becoming morally transformed are not always the same process. Religious identity may involve belonging to a faith, following rituals, visiting sacred places, and participating in community traditions. Moral development, however, requires something deeper: self-examination, emotional discipline, integrity, humility, and consistent ethical action. A person may faithfully perform religious practices without seriously reflecting on their own anger, greed, dishonesty, prejudice, or ego. In such cases, religion becomes more of a routine than a force of transformation. The outer form remains active, but the inner work remains incomplete. This does not mean religion is ineffective by nature. Rather, it suggests that rituals alone do not guarantee moral growth. Transformation requires active engagement with the values that religion teaches. A useful way to understand this is through the idea of proportion. If someone spends 1 hour a day in prayer, worship, or religious reading, but spends the remaining 23 hours in environments shaped by stress, competition, selfishness, or habit, then the moral influence of that 1 hour may remain limited. The person may feel peaceful, sincere, or disciplined during the time of worship. But once daily pressures return, old patterns of thinking and behavior often reassert themselves. This does not mean that 1 hour of religious practice is meaningless. Even brief moments of reflection can be valuable. However, if spiritual thought is confined to a small, isolated part of the day, it may fail to reshape the rest of life. Religion then becomes compartmentalized. It stays in the place of worship, in prayer time, or in festivals, rather than entering speech, relationships, work, and decision-making. In this sense, the problem may not be with religion itself, but with how it is practiced. If religious activity is treated as a duty to be completed rather than a truth to be lived, its transformative power remains weak. Human behavior is shaped more by repeated habits than by occasional emotional or spiritual experiences. A person may be moved by a sermon, inspired by a prayer, or touched by a sacred teaching, yet continue behaving in the same way because everyday habits are stronger than temporary inspiration. Anger, pride, impatience, and selfishness are not removed merely by listening to moral teachings. They are weakened only through repeated self-control and conscious practice. This is why even sincere religious people may show little visible change. They may genuinely value goodness, but their habits, social conditioning, and personal weaknesses remain stronger than their ideals. Religion may point them toward a better life, but walking that path requires deliberate effort. Without this effort, religious knowledge stays at the level of belief and does not become character. Another reason transformation is limited is that religion often functions as a social institution as much as a spiritual path. People may participate in religious life because of family expectations, community belonging, cultural continuity, or social respectability. These are not trivial motives, but they are different from the inward search for truth and ethical refinement. When religion is practiced mainly for social reasons, the emphasis often falls on appearances. Attending services, observing festivals, wearing religious symbols, and performing visible acts of devotion. These outward expressions can be meaningful, but they may also create an illusion of moral accomplishment. A person may begin to feel that participation itself is proof of goodness, even if conduct remains unchanged. In such situations, religion can become ceremonial rather than transformational. Inner religion, by contrast, asks more difficult questions. It requires a person to confront hypocrisy, control desires, forgive others, accept responsibility, and live by principle even when no one is watching. This kind of religion is much harder and therefore less common. Many religious traditions teach noble values such as compassion, truthfulness, humility, service, patience, and forgiveness. The difficulty lies not in admiring these values, but in applying them under pressure. It is easy to speak gently in prayer and harshly in conflict. It is easy to praise honesty and principle and compromise it in business or personal gain. The true test of religion is not what a person does in a sacred space, but what that person does in ordinary situations involving power, money, family, disagreement, and temptation. This helps explain why transformation is often not visible. The standards of religion are usually high, but daily life is demanding. Unless religious teaching is actively carried into routine behavior, the individual remains divided, devotional in one setting, unchanged in another. The result is inconsistency rather than character formation. It would be unfair to conclude that religion itself fails simply because many religious people do not fully embody its ideals. Every system of moral teaching faces the same challenge. Principles do not automatically become practice. Education does not guarantee wisdom. Law does not guarantee justice. Similarly, religion does not guarantee virtue unless it is deeply internalized. Religion can be a powerful source of personal transformation when it is accompanied by sincerity, reflection, self-discipline, and ethical consistency. Many individuals have indeed become more compassionate, self-controlled, and service-oriented through genuine spiritual practice. But such change usually comes when religion is treated not merely as worship, but as a continuous discipline of thought and conduct. The real question, then, is not whether a person is religious, but how religion functions in that person's life. If religious practice remains limited to ritual performance, its effect may be narrow and temporary. If it becomes a daily framework for thinking, speaking, choosing, and relating to others, then its impact can be profound. For religion to transform human behavior, it must move beyond the hour of worship and enter the remaining hours of the day. It must influence how one responds to criticism, treats subordinates, handles success, faces frustration, and deals with moral choices. In other words, religion must become lived ethics rather than scheduled devotion. The observation that many religious people do not seem morally superior to non-religious people is not entirely irrational. It reflects a real gap that often exists between outward religiosity and inward transformation. However, this gap should not be understood as proof that religion is meaningless. Rather, it shows that ritual participation alone is not enough. Genuine transformation requires that spiritual principles be practiced repeatedly in ordinary life, not only observed in sacred moments. Religion has the potential to refine character, but only when it is more than a formal habit. The measure of spiritual depth is not how often one visits a place of worship, but how consistently one carries truth, compassion, restraint, and integrity into the rest of the day. That is where transformation becomes visible, and that is where religion proves its true worth. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and share it. Subscribe to my channel for more content on relationships and family, social issues and empowerment, mental health and personal growth, and a variety of other topics.